Gifts come wrapped in kindness. That's the part that makes them so hard to see clearly at first. My brother-in-law gave me a smart home speaker for Christmas. A nice one. The kind you set on your kitchen counter and ask the weather, play music through, add things to your grocery list. He handed it to me with a big smile and said, "You're retired now, Clifford. You deserve something that makes life easier." I thanked him. I meant it. I was 63 years old and I had just finished 31 years as a plant operations supervisor at a paper manufacturing facility outside Columbus, Ohio. My wife Renata had passed 2 years before, pancreatic cancer, 8 months from diagnosis to the end, and my brother-in-law Theodore had, to his credit, shown up at the hospital more than once during those final weeks. He helped me carry boxes after the funeral. He got on her birthday the following year. I thought he was a decent man. The speaker sat on my kitchen counter from Christmas through New Year's and into January. I asked it the weather every morning. I played old Marvin Gaye records through it on Sunday afternoons when the house got too quiet. I didn't think about it as anything other than what it appeared to be. My neighbor is the one who changed that. His name is Frank. We have been neighbors for 11 years. He's the kind of man who knows how things work. Spent 20 years as an IT security contractor before he retired. And even in retirement, he keeps up with things, reads the trade publications, still consults occasionally. His wife Diane and my Renata used to drink coffee together on Saturday mornings. After Renata died, Frank started checking in on me more. Not intrusively, just present in the way that good neighbors are. One Saturday in late January, Frank came over to help me look at my water heater, which had been making a sound I didn't like. Afterward, we sat in the kitchen with coffee. He noticed the speaker on the counter and his expression shifted. Not dramatically, just slightly. The way a man's face changes when he recognizes something he wasn't expecting to see. He asked where I got it. I told him Theodore gave it to me for Christmas. He picked it up, turned it over. He looked at the model number on the bottom and then he put it down carefully, the way you put down something you're not sure about. "Clifford," he said, "when did you set this up?" I said Christmas Day. He asked if I had connected it to my home Wi-Fi. I had. Theodore had walked me through it right there in my living room on Christmas afternoon. Frank was quiet for a moment. He asked if he could take it home to look at it more carefully. I said, sure, not entirely understanding why, but trusting him. He took it with him when he left. He was back at my door 2 hours later. He sat down at my kitchen table and he told me what he had found. The device had been registered to an account before I ever received it. Not my account, not a generic factory account, someone else's account. And that account had access permissions that allowed for remote audio monitoring, a feature that exists in some smart home ecosystems, ostensibly for household members to check in, but which can be used to listen to ambient sound in whatever room the device is placed in. He explained it to me in plain terms. Someone could, if they wanted to, open an app on their phone and listen to whatever was happening in my kitchen. I sat with that for a moment. My kitchen, where I drank my morning coffee and talked to myself the way you do when you live alone. Where I had called my daughter Simone last November and told her I was thinking about downsizing and maybe putting the house on the market. Where I had called my accountant in December and discussed moving some of my retirement accounts. I asked Frank if he was certain. He showed me on his own laptop the account attached to the device's registration. He couldn't show me whose account it was without more access than he had, but he was certain the device had been pre-configured before it was given to me. I thanked him and I walked him to the door and I stood in my kitchen alone for a long time after that. I want to be careful here about what I say, because at that point I did not know for certain who had set it up or why. I only knew that my brother-in-law had given it to me, had personally connected it to my Wi-Fi, and that it had been registered to an account that was not mine before it arrived in my home. I called my daughter Simone that evening. She lives in Atlanta, works in healthcare administration, sharp woman, takes nothing at face value. I told her what Frank had found. She was quiet for a moment, the way her mother used to be quiet, when she was thinking hard about something. Then she said, "Dad, how much does Uncle Theodore know about your finances?" I thought about that question for longer than I should have needed to. The honest answer was, more than I had realized. Over the past year, since Renata passed, Theodore had inserted himself gradually into things, not aggressively, not in any way that felt inappropriate at any single moment. He had offered to help me sort through Renata's estate documents, which were complicated because she had accounts from before our marriage that needed to be properly transferred. He had come with me to one meeting with my financial advisor, which I had invited him to because I was still in a fog of grief and wanted someone familiar in the room. He had offered, twice, to help me manage some of my property matters, including a small rental house I own outright in a suburb of Columbus. I had declined both times, but gently. When I laid it all out in my head that night, I could see a shape to it that I had not seen before. I did not sleep well. The next morning I called Frank again and asked him if he thought I should go to the police. He said that was my decision, but that the evidence as it stood was ambiguous. The account access could potentially be explained away as a factory default or a setup error, and that what I really needed first was to understand what Theodore had actually done with any information he might have gathered, if he had gathered any at all. He was right. I spent the next 3 days being very careful. I did not confront Theodore. I did not call him. I did not change my behavior in any visible way. What I did was call my accountant privately from my car in a parking lot and ask her to pull a full review of all account access logs, going back 18 months. I called the property management company that handles my rental house and asked them to verify that all paperwork on file was current and that no changes had been made to the ownership or contact information. I called my estate attorney, a woman named Patricia Holloway who had handled Renata's estate, and I told her I needed to come in and review my own documents as soon as possible. Patricia got me in on the second day. What she showed me made my stomach drop. 6 weeks earlier, someone had contacted her office requesting a copy of my estate documents, claiming to be acting on my behalf. Patricia's paralegal had responded that they would need written authorization from me directly. No authorization had been provided, so the request had gone nowhere. But the inquiry was logged. The name on the inquiry matched Theodore's email address. Patricia had assumed at the time it was a miscommunication, perhaps a family member trying to help with paperwork and not understanding the process. She had not called me because the request had been denied and she thought nothing further of it. She was calling me now. Right there in her office, she was looking at me across the desk with the careful expression of a professional who understands exactly what she is looking at. She asked me if I had authorized Theodore to inquire about my estate. I had not. She asked if I had any reason to believe he had been attempting to access other aspects of my finances. I told her about the speaker. I told her about the account. I told her about the rental property. She picked up her phone and called a colleague while I sat there. I want to tell you what the days before and after that meeting felt like, because I think it matters. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes with realizing that someone you trusted, someone who sat with you at your wife's funeral, someone who goes on holidays, someone your children grew up knowing as an uncle, has been treating your grief as an opportunity. I am 63 years old. I am not a fool and I have never been a careless man. And I still did not see it until someone else pointed it out to me. That is the thing I keep coming back to. Not the anger, though there was anger. Not the sense of violation, though that was real. It was the simple fact that it had been invisible to me, because I trusted him, because in the aftermath of losing Renata I had wanted, badly, to believe that the people around me were exactly who they appeared to be. Simone flew up from Atlanta on the third day. She did not tell me she was coming. She just appeared at my door on a Wednesday morning with a carry-on bag and a look on her face that meant she had already made decisions I wasn't aware of. She had done her own research on the drive from the airport. She told me that Theodore's financial situation had deteriorated significantly in the past 2 years. A business he had started after leaving his previous employer had not done well, and he had significant debt. She had learned this from Renata's sister, who had mentioned it in passing months ago and not thought to connect it to anything. Simone had connected it. She also told me that Theodore had recently been in contact with a real estate attorney in Columbus, not my attorney, a different one specializing in property transfers. The rental house. I owned it free and clear, no mortgage. It was worth, by recent estimates, somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000. I made 3 phone calls from my kitchen table with Simone sitting across from me. The first was to my property management company, instructing them to flag any incoming documentation or requests relating to that property. The second was to my bank to review authorization levels on all accounts and to add a verbal security confirmation requirement for any changes. The third was to the Columbus Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit to report what we had found. The officer I spoke to took a full statement over 2 days. He was not dismissive. He was not the kind of officer who calls things family drama and sends you home. He was methodical, and he asked the right questions, and when I told him about the speaker and the estate inquiry and the real estate attorney, he wrote everything down. I want to be clear that at the time of this recording, the investigation is ongoing, and I am not in a position to share every detail of what has been uncovered. What I can tell you is that the Financial Crimes Unit made contact with Theodore approximately 2 weeks after my initial report. What I can tell you is that Simone was at my house when 2 detectives came by to follow up, and that the look on their faces when they left was not the look of people who had found nothing. What I can tell you is that Theodore has not contacted me since that day, and that his attorney has been in touch with my attorney. What I can tell you is that the rental house is still mine. I have thought a great deal about what I want to say about my sister-in-law, Theodore's wife, Renata's sister, because this is where it gets complicated and where I am still figuring out what I believe. Her name is Odessa. She and Renata grew up together, shared a bedroom until Odessa went off to college. She stood beside me at the funeral and wept in a way that did not look like performance. She has called me twice since all of this became known, and both times I let it go to voicemail, and both times she said she didn't know any of it. Please believe her. I don't know what to believe about Odessa. I'm telling you that honestly. It is possible she knew nothing. It is possible she knew some of it. The investigation will likely clarify that in time. What I know is that I am not ready to have that conversation with her yet, and I think that is a reasonable place to be. My daughter thinks Odessa was innocent. She says a woman who genuinely knew what her husband was doing would not have mentioned the financial problems to Renata's other sister the way she did, carelessly, in passing. She says that's not how someone covers a secret. She may be right. I am not there yet. What I have found, in the months since all of this came to light, is that grief makes you vulnerable in ways you do not fully understand while you're inside it. Not because grief makes you stupid. I was not stupid. Not because it makes you naive. I was not naive, or at least I had not thought of myself that way. But grief narrows your vision in a specific direction. It makes you want, so desperately, to believe that the people still standing around you are there because they love you. It makes you extend trust because trust is the only thing that feels warm when everything else is cold. Theodore understood that about me. I think he understood it and decided to use it. And I think he started small, each step small enough to seem like help, like family, like care. And he kept going until Frank picked up that speaker and turned it over in his hands. I have replaced the speaker, different brand, bought myself, set up myself, connected to a separate network Frank helped me configure. It sits on the same counter. It plays the same Marvin Gaye on Sunday afternoons. But I set it up myself, and I know exactly whose account it's registered to. My accountant now sends me a monthly access summary. My estate documents have been reviewed and updated. The rental property has a new management contact protocol. These are not dramatic changes. They are the quiet, unglamorous work of a man who learns something he wishes he hadn't needed to learn. Simone calls more often now. Not out of worry, or not only out of worry. I think she calls because we both understand something we didn't quite understand before. That the time we have is not guaranteed, and that the people who show up, really show up, are worth more than anything. Theodore was trying to get his hands on. Frank and I have coffee on Saturday mornings now. He sits in the chair where Diane used to sit, and I sit across from him, and we drink our coffee, and sometimes we don't say anything at all, and that is enough. I am 63 years old. I built what I have over 31 years of early mornings and hard work and a marriage that was, for 28 years, the steadiest thing in my life. I am not going to apologize for expecting the people around me to be who they say they are. And I am not going to stop trusting entirely because that is not the lesson. The lesson is quieter than that. Slow down when something feels off. Not alarming, not loud, just slightly wrong. like a sound you can't quite place. Slow down. You don't have to act immediately. You don't have to confront anyone immediately. You just have to stop moving so fast that you miss what's right in front of you. I missed it for almost a year. A good neighbor, a thoughtful daughter, and an honest attorney helped me find it before it cost me more than it did. If this story sounds familiar to you, if you're hearing something in it that echoes something in your own life, I want you to sit with that, not in panic, just in honesty with yourself. The people who want something from you rarely announce it. They bring it wrapped in a smile and something that looks like a gift, and they set it on your counter and walk away. And you, like me, say thank you and mean it. Don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Uncle Russell and share this with someone who needs to hear it. If this story helped you see something more clearly, that is exactly why we do this. I keep thinking about that speaker sitting on my counter for a month, playing Marvin Gaye, telling me the weather, and all that time, someone may have been on the other end of it, listening to a grieving man talk to himself in his own kitchen. That is not a comfortable thought, but I have made my peace with it, because I understand now what it taught me. Theodore did not become that person overnight. I don't believe that. I think he looked at my life, the paid-off house, the rental property, the retirement accounts Renata and I had built together over decades. And he looked at his own situation, the failed business, the debt, the quiet desperation of a man who made bad choices and needed someone else to absorb the consequences. And then he looked at me, fresh in my grief, leaning on the people around me the way you do when the steadiest thing in your life has just been taken from you. And he made a calculation. That calculation was a moral failure, not a mistake, not a lapse in judgment, a choice. He chose it. Every step, from the first conversation about Renata's estate to the speaker he carried into my living room and personally connected to my Wi-Fi, was a choice. And choices like that do not stay hidden forever. They accumulate. They leave trails in account logs and paralegal records and device registrations. The truth of what a person is doing has a way of surfacing, not because the universe is just in some mystical sense, but because dishonest actions require more and more maintenance, and eventually the maintenance fails. Frank picked up that speaker. Patricia found the inquiry log. Simone connected the dots I had been too close to see. That is not luck. That is what happens when a man has spent 63 years building relationships based on something real, and the people in those relationships show up when it matters. What I did in those 3 days between finding out and calling the police, the quiet checking, the careful phone calls from parking lots, the meeting with Patricia, that was the hardest kind of discipline. Every instinct I had wanted to call Theodore directly and demand an explanation. I did not. I slowed down. I gathered what I needed before I moved. That restraint is not something that comes naturally to me. I had to choose it, consciously, every hour of those 3 days. I think that is the thing I am most grateful for about how this unfolded. Not the outcome, though the outcome matters. The thing I am most grateful for is that I did not act from panic or rage. I acted from clarity. And the clarity came from slowing down enough to actually see what was in front of me. Grief had narrowed my vision for 2 years. I had been moving through the world with a kind of functional blindness, trusting that the warmth around me was genuine because I needed it to be. There is no shame in that. But when Frank sat across from me at that kitchen table, I made a choice to see clearly, even when seeing clearly was painful. That choice, to face the truth and act on it with a steady hand rather than a shaking one, is the only reason the rental house is still mine. I am 63. I have more years behind me than I once thought I had in front of me. What I know now, that I did not know 2 years ago, is that the life you build is only as secure as your willingness to protect it. Not with suspicion, not with walls, but with clear eyes and the quiet, unglamorous habit of paying attention. Simone calls on Sundays now. Frank comes for coffee on Saturdays. The house is mine. That is enough.